But without further ado, we have a fully packed lineup for you all today. We have so many phenomenal speakers that we're so excited to bring to you. And I'm just loving all this female empowerment that we've had all morning long. To keep it going, we do have our fireside chat here between Jill Layfield, the co-founder and CEO of Tamara Mellon, and Stephanie Barbaran, the managing editor of the LA Business Journal. So storytelling is something that is sort of an oxymoron in and of itself. It's something that is broadly understood by all, yet still has a bit of a unique meaning to each individual that sort of comes across it. And even fewer of the audience that interact with your story will form a connection to it based on some shared value or experience. So tuning in now, hopefully you can learn how to become a voice for women and amplifying their voices, and how that helped Tamara Mellon create an authentic identity in a crowded space using intention and purpose. So, like I said, here we have Jill and Stephanie joining us. Thank you, ladies.
Hi. we're thrilled to be here. Hi, everyone.
Yes, hello, thank you. And I absolutely love the artwork you have behind you, Jill. For anyone who doesn't know, Tamara Mellon is primarily a footwear brand. So that's a great little visual aid for everyone.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky to, at least when I'm in the office, which is very rare. I'm here today just because I didn't want to have internet issues at home, but I'm pretty lucky to be surrounded by beautiful imagery of beautiful shoes. But more importantly, inevitably, my desk is filled with beautiful red boxes and shoes inside them. So yeah,
nice.
It's a pretty nice perk.
Very nice. Well, without further ado, I'll let you two ladies take it away.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you, Hawke Media, for hosting. Thank you, Jill, for taking the time to share your insights and experience today. Let's dive right in. Could you get us started with a little bit more about you, Jill, and how you came to be part of this disruptive direct-to-consumer luxury brand?
Oh, of course. I've now been in LA for a little over 4 years. We're celebrating 4 years of the brand. We launched in October of 2016. And I previously was living in Park City, Utah. I was the CEO of Backcountry, an online premium outdoor gear retailer. And I was there for 11 years. I joined in a marketing role. I ran product, I ran engineering, took that business from about 30 million in revenue to a little over 500 million, and then sold it to private equity. Prior to that, I worked in consumer internet, Shutterfly, and a couple other brands. After we sold Backcountry, I was like, what am I going to do next with my life? And I had this, crisis, because I thought, well, CEOs don't really do anything. I think as a doer, I was sort of like, I'd moved into a CEO role over 11 years. And I had this crisis of what actually do I do and what do I know? And, just what's going to come next. Got introduced to the team at NEA, who's an investor in Tamara Mellon, and they said, we've got an amazing founder who's a creative who previously founded Jimmy Choo, and she's since left Jimmy Choo and wants to start another luxury footwear brand, but she wants to do it in a completely different way. She wants to sort of disrupt the model of how you create and bring a luxury footwear brand to market. And one of the key aspects of that was e-commerce. And, Tamara said, I don't know e-commerce. And so NEA sort of put us together. It was like a blind date. I met her in LA. She was super glamorous and, knows everything about design and footwear. And we, although we're different and we're from very different backgrounds, we were sort of, we found a common ground as it related to purpose for the brand and what we wanted to do for women and the kind of culture we wanted to create. And that was enough for me. I thought, how many chances do you get in life to join somebody that's done it before in a category and yet flexible enough to want to do it again in a different way? And so I picked up my family and moved to LA, and here we are.
Awesome. Thank you. And I also want to take just a moment to let our attendees know that we will be taking a few questions at the end of our chat. and that everyone should be sure to join the Brand Club LA Slack. And our event host just posted the link to that channel, Tamara Mellon Connect and Convert, so that we can get some questions in at the end after we get into a little more detail about how you approached positioning Tamara Mellon as a disruptor and what it took for you and your team to define storytelling, how you were going to convey the story of your brand and differentiate that messaging from your competitors.
Yeah, so it's funny when Hawke approached me about speaking at the e-commerce week here in LA, I was sort of like much more comfortable with a topic that is like black and white and data driven and highly structured. So I think it's kind of funny actually that we're talking about sort of a nebulous topic, but one that is so critical when you're thinking about building a brand, and actually something that when I then thought about talking about this today, I thought, well, actually we have a structure for how we think about brand and storytelling, and it fits within the overall disruptor model that we created when we launched the brand. So we took a big step back and we said, what are the ways in which we think the luxury market needs to be redefined, and particularly in the category of designer footwear. And we said, okay, well, we need to bring the product to market in a different way. We need to price it differently. We need to have a different channel strategy. And then finally, and relevant to this topic, is we need to create a brand in a very different way. So if we're looking back at how brands have historically built what we call pride of association with their audience in the luxury space, it's always been about status and exclusivity. And both Tamara and I were like, okay, well, exclusivity is important, but we said, we don't want the brand to be exclusive. We want the product to be exclusive. And instead we want, the brand to be inclusive. And most importantly, we want pride of association with our audience and our customer to not be about shared status, but really to be about shared purpose. It's a very careful needle to thread in a luxury business, because again, exclusivity of the product and aspiration, fantasy, beauty, all of that is so much of the emotion is important in luxury. But we were just tired of luxury brands being opaque and not thinking about community. And so we set off to do it very differently. And that's, really what's been the anchor around the way we create content and the way we try to build the brand.
So did you discuss with your team how you would construct channels of messaging, and what did that conversation look like to lay that foundation so that you could be united around that vision?
Yes. So as I said earlier, I love structure, and I'm very uncomfortable when things don't feel clearly defined and actionable and something a company can rally behind. So for the first 6 months, I actually pre-launch, I should actually say that, for the first 3 months pre-launch, and then right after, we spent countless hours sort of trying to deconstruct what really was shared purpose that we wanted to own. And it started as empowerment for women and feminism, but that felt really big and not specific, and for me, not ownable and sort of actionable. And so, it wasn't a great process to get there, but eventually, through really understanding authentically what Tamara meant by doing something for women and moving equality forward for women, we settled on two sort of big drivers underpinned by two other things. So, and I, we call these our pillars. So the first was, we want women to know their worth. And a lot of the content that you see that comes out of that is around pay equity. So it was authentic to Tamara because she had had experiences in her career where she wasn't paid what she should be paid to do the same job a man has done. And so she really felt like we as a brand needed to stand for women really understanding, really knowing their worth. And that is sort of like fundamental in what you're paid, and advocating for fair pay. The second thing was, our second pillar was really around women owning their health. So, Tamara and I both would talk about how we're just like exhausted all the time and we never have time for ourselves. And we don't advocate not only for maybe what we should be earning, but taking care of both our physical and our mental health. And so again, that felt very authentic to us. And a lot, again, of our content, like around, women making time to get mammograms. It's very timely here for October. It's really about women taking and owning, again, they're taking the steps and owning their health. Now that is underpinned by two things, as I mentioned, first being women owning their voice, because you can't advocate for your worth or your health if you don't know how to speak up. And while as a brand, we try to give you those tools and the community to help you speak up, like fundamentally, you have to own your voice. And that is something that we always say, how is this helping women own their voice, specifically in those two areas? And then finally, and this is where it gets really tricky, is how does this all relate to shoes? Because at the end of the day, we're selling shoes, right? And, tying that back to like Tamara's legacy at Jimmy Choo, that, those are the four things we're constantly talking about. How do we ensure women know their worth? How do we ensure that women are owning their health? How are women owning their voice? And then how does this tie to us selling shoes? And that became the framework.
Wow. So when you are, relaying that to your team, is there an underlying mindset that helps everyone stay on message no matter what channel they're on? And I think some of our attendees would understand that some companies have invested heavily in defining personas. What does it look like for your team to stay focused when you're producing the content and the posts and everything that are going to drive conversions?
Yeah, so we, when we're talking about, our calendar of merchandising, of content creation, of marketing, we are always doing it through this lens of, we sort of call it like e-commerce, general e-commerce. And we always say, like, we don't want to become too just e-commerce, but we also don't want to be too much just like purpose-driven messaging. We strive to find that balance, and there isn't like a recipe. I can't be like, we're like 25% of the time we're talking about, our purpose and creating our community, and 75% it's e-commerce, but we're constantly like debating real time. Okay, what is that like pulse, and always looking for the opportunity to connect the two. And that's hard. To your sort of like, maybe question around, customer or audience, I think one of the things, so I sort of talked about what we did early days. One of the things we've done, in the last like 12 months is spend some time really understanding a little more about like, okay, who's our audience? What's the cultural and competitive context that she's living in? And what's the like pain in between those two things, right? Like, why is her life really hard? And what is the competition not doing to make her life easier or better? And then therefore, what are our brand superpowers in the middle that like cut through that and make her world and her life better? So we've sort of done that work. We call it our muse work. And we've like connected that to the pillars to then say, okay, well, as we develop content, are we really thinking about why this is making her life better, like right now, today, given the cultural and competitive context she's operating within? So it's, again, like, I feel so like wishy-washy. It's not like, there's not like a formula. It's a constant conversation about that relationship between commerce driven communication, content, ideally the intersection, how relevant it is for our muse. And then to your point, maybe what are the channels that we go out to with our various messages?
Okay, so you mentioned your brand superpowers. You've got a different price point. You've got a cobbler concierge service. You've got a design aesthetic. You've got your for women, by women perspective. All of these things set you apart. How do you and your team then prioritize, across your calendar, where are your opportunities to emphasize one superpower over the other? And then, what does that look like in terms of turning it into action items for your team to put online?
So, I mean, we use a pretty standard sort of like, where is she in the funnel, or where is she in the process of like becoming hopefully a loyal customer to Tamara Mellon. And we introduce different elements of the brand and different messages at different times. So like Cobbler Concierge is I'm like glad you mentioned that, because I think, again, I'm like a very like black and white person. So when we launched the brand and we had Cobbler Concierge, I was like, this is amazing. Like, and sorry for those of you that don't know what it is. It's part of
Can you tell us what it is? Please tell our attendees what it is.
It's part of our service. It's part of how we are doing service differently. So again, going back to this idea that pride of association was based on status traditionally with luxury brands, and the brands are sort of opaque and exclusive. There was this like VIP for a few, not every customer is a VIP, and we wanted to like blow that up. And so we thought, well, the best customers at luxury brands, they get taken care of in ways the non-best customers get taken care of. I mean, it's a very like traditional sort of best customer marketing strategy. And we thought, well, we want everybody to feel like a VIP. And one of the ways we can do this is by offering a service called Cobbler Concierge, which is when you buy a pair of shoes from us for 2 years, you can send the shoes back to us. We have a partner, and we will repair a heel scuff or a toe scuff or, a scratch in the leather. And it's really this idea that like, we're not done with you once you buy. And we as women have caught our heel in a grate and just died when it's a $500 or $1,000 pair of shoes. So we want to make every customer feel like a VIP. And so we're going to offer this service that's above and beyond. Now, when I joined, I was like, oh, well, this is what we'll lead with, one of our messages in our acquisition marketing. Why wouldn't everybody want this? But there was like a disconnect in either explaining it or it really being a driver. And so as an example, that's moved to something that we really use from a communication and content perspective as a driver of repeat purchase, and sort of that wowing her after she makes the first purchase and saying, by the way, this is something you now get with the brand. And that drives that repeat behavior, as opposed to leading with like, come buy from Tamara Mellon because we have Cobbler Concierge. It's like a disconnect. And so we think about that and putting different messages in at different points. So, audience marketing, so non-customer marketing, there's a lot around purpose and, Tamara's legacy as the Jimmy Choo, designer and co-founder. But it's about sort of sequencing the message based on insights you get, and, once you've launched.
That's really interesting. So what were the maybe the data points or the determining factors that tipped you off to like, oh, we need to pivot? And what were the tools you were using? What was that conversation like?
Yeah, well, I don't think anything would be shocking from everybody watching right now. We're looking at whether we put a piece of content on Instagram, and we measure, what's the engagement with the content, how many saves are there, how many shares. If it's something that we're putting in an ad and it's, in Facebook as an example, we're looking at, click-through rates. So nothing shocking there. But, I think the point is that we have been very test driven. So like, again, when we launched, I was like, well, who wouldn't want to know that you're getting from a quality perspective and exclusivity perspective, you're getting $1,000 shoe for $500. We'll just put that on the product detail page. We'll tell everybody, lots of other direct to consumer brands have done. But then we would A/B test that and see actually, that's not helping add to cart. So I think it's all the fundamental metrics. There's no big aha for anybody watching here on a platform or metric. It's just a commitment to the discipline of assuming you're likely not right on everything and testing and measuring everything.
Great. Well, so then when you're applying that approach to telling user stories versus product stories versus brand stories, how do those things look different for your team? Are they different in how you approach the messaging or the channels that you're using? What's that look like?
Yeah, so the first thing that I'll say, so let me break this down. So we don't tell a lot of we don't have a lot of content that's user facing. Like we don't have UGC, we don't tell stories about our customers. The main reason we don't do that is we are a fashion luxury brand, and really the aesthetic and the story is Tamara. And so we focus there. That's a strategic decision. However, we obviously tell product and then, sort of like brand stories. Product stories are very fashion driven in terms of how we communicate what we're going to do internally and then our approach externally. As it relates to anything like brand or this nebulous world, we've really taken a cue from Amazon and we write press releases. So it's just sometimes too hard internally to communicate what we're going to do. So I'll give an example. So Mother's Day this year, in the middle of the COVID, in the middle of the pandemic at sort of its worst stage initially, Mother's Day happens and we're like, well, what are we going to do? And so we had this idea because we were looking at a lot of data and seeing that actually women with children, mothers who work, are going to be disproportionately screwed by what the pandemic has meant for working women, because women are essentially being forced back into the home. And then they're making this horrible choice. Do I take care of my children? Do I, put my job as number one? And so we said, well, let's do this thing called a work in progress. And let's aggregate feedback from people about what companies can do to set up mothers to be successful. Like what programs and policies can companies adopt to ensure that their employees who are mothers don't leave the workforce, because we don't want to take a big step back, and all the progress we've made. And as we're talking about this, a handful of us, we're like, yes, okay, great. And we're gonna get all this feedback, and we're gonna put it into a guide, and then we're gonna publish it, and a few of us got it, but then we were like, well, there's a lot of moving parts here. So what we did was we wrote a press release. It's not actually a press release we put out. It's just something internal. And it's something I don't remember what the headline was, but, Tamara Mellon saves working mothers, by publishing a work in progress guide for companies to keep women, mothers working through the pandemic. And then we write all about they got contributions from these people and they got contributions from these partners. And and it paints a vision for what we're trying to accomplish, as well as some measurable, both qualitative and quantitative, some measurable elements. So we know that when we bring it to life, if it's actually successful or not. So that's it's a lot of heavy lifting, a lot harder, frankly, on the content side than the true product commerce side.
What were some of the data points that came out of that you walked away with that you might apply to your next initiatives?
Yeah, so the first it wasn't the first time. It was the second or third time that we had asked our customers to contribute to the creation of the content. So, and we'd had not great engagement in the past, and it was overwhelming, the amount of input that we got back from our customers. I don't remember the specific numbers, but magnitude of 10 times what we usually hear from our customers, because we went out and we said, well, we don't have all the answers. So why don't you all tell us what's wrong or not working, and what would make it easier for you to get your job done and take care of your family during this crisis, and what things your company could do for you. And it was phenomenal, the response we got. The second measure was we published the work in progress guide. And the second measurement was, well, how many people actually downloaded it, and like how useful was it? And again, I think from a comparatively, this is kind of funny, we created 2 other pieces of content. One was downloadable Zoom backgrounds for customers, like of beautiful shoes. I mean, yeah, like the numbers, customers downloaded the Zoom backgrounds, but like it was, not even close in terms of how much the work in progress guide was downloaded. And then we also, because I thought it was very funny at the beginning when the company was introduced, I think she said Tamara, and inevitably everybody says the name wrong. And we published a guide on how to say Tamara. It was very funny. And again, not a lot of engagement. And that told us, really what our customer wants right now is content that is deeply relevant to, again, the pain that they're feeling in their life. And so we now we're leaning more into that without it getting too heavy, because also as a fashion brand, she wants to escape. So.
Yeah. Which channels were you putting these pieces of content on, and what the metrics you were pulling? Because you mentioned talking to them and then the feedback you're getting, where was all that coming from?
Yeah. So we posted on, sort of all of our social channels. On our website is where they downloaded the content, and then via email.
Great. So did you outline like a series of posts, or how did you construct it? Was it over the course of a certain, the week leading into Mother's Day? Was there a plan around which graphics you were going to use, how much you were investing in the production of the guide? What did that look like?
So typically when we do some, a piece of content or a campaign like this, they're typically like about a week. With a few exceptions, and I would say the biggest being like pay equity, which is something you'll see like throughout the year with us. I mean, we'll talk about pay equity on Equal Pay Day, usually in April, and then like Black women equal pay was in August, and so like there's pulses, because it's like a much worse situation, pay equity for women of color, than it is for a white woman. It's like, it just gets worse. Like we're 20% below men. And then, for a Black woman, it's worse than that. And then anyway, so there's like a pulse of content around equal pay throughout the year. Otherwise, we time box, it's roughly like a week. And we usually like build up the content. It's sort of crescendo, it reaches a crescendo, and then and then we have a taper off plan. So like, as an example, we just did this with Carla Welch in our collaboration with her, and our drive for voter registration. And again, it was like roughly a week, and it ended on voter registration day, which I believe was the 24th. That feels like the right sort of length for us, because again, we have to strike that balance of like, at the end of the day, we sell shoes, and we can't get too heavily weighted towards this like purpose marketing and conversation, because it can be dilutive to, the commerce side of the business.
Mm-hmm. So when you're budgeting for your storytelling in terms of quantitative resources and manpower, or women power, how are you, have you invested the same amount in, the one initiative that didn't do as well as the Mother's Day initiative that did really well? And then does that affect how you are budgeting for something like the voting registration and other campaigns you want to do for your brand association?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I should say is we always spend more money on everything visual. So it's quite interesting because I am like a lover of words. And I think that's probably why we write a lot of narratives. We have, press releases, as I mentioned a minute ago. But at the end of the day, we say our language of love is photography, because, a great image of a shoe just grabs you. And at the end of the day, we have to sell shoes. And, we know that she's going to see something, and that's going to drive a conversion more than she's going to read something. So we spend a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot more money on imagery and photography. We are super scrappy on everything content related. We don't usually even have a budget. We have one copy person who does a bunch of other jobs, and then the rest of us just fill in around it. If there's a tie into like product, so like with the Carla Welch collaboration, where there's 3 shoes that we designed with Carla, who's a celebrity stylist, and we're going to tie in like a give back. We'll put, we put a dollar amount, because I think we gave, I think it was $10 for every, we set up a campaign around voter registration where you could text KWXTM or something like that. It would tell you if you were registered, and if you weren't, it would walk you through registration. And we contributed $10 to I'm a Voter for every person that texted that. And so yes, we set a budget there, but when we do something like that, it's always tied to commerce, and it's always tied to like, the broader goal of like, okay, we want to sell these shoes. If it's not tied to commerce, like in the Mother's Day example with the work in progress, there's no budget. We just, it's just, figure out how to get it done, and everybody just sort of come together. It's not like we have a big content. We have a big creative team that does all our imagery. But when it comes to content, it's like myself, Tamara, and like our brand copy person, who also writes all our commerce content too. I don't think you need a big budget. You just need your North Star.
When you are investing in this photography love language and pulling all the other pieces together, how are you determining the plan for the photo shoots in ways that it's going to visualize the message that you want to convey? Is there a line drawn through all of those elements to keep everyone saying, this is the theme for this campaign? So with your collaborations with the designers you work with, and has that process of visualizing these concepts, how has that evolved over the years for you?
It's a really good question. So there is clearly, hopefully, a overall aesthetic, sort of, there's clarity around our overall aesthetic that, is communicated by obviously Tamara and sort of her ethos from a design and creative perspective. But we've always said we don't want to look like every other fashion brand. And so we've actually spent a lot of time, again, I was talking about this idea of like the audience and the cultural and competitive context and like the pain in between. We've always talked about how do we shoot and create, imagery in a way that speaks to that pain or like solving that pain. We sometimes we call it like these in-between moments that only we, because we're women designing for women, can like understand and capture. And so we'll spend a lot of time from a concepting perspective, a couple times a year, trying to find, opportunities like that from a photography perspective. Now, let me be clear. There's a lot of our imagery that's just beautiful shoes. We call it shoe obsession, and it's very traditional fashion. But I think what you'll find if you're watching the brand is that intermixed with that are, in some ways, I guess I would say like a visual representation of like this idea of like purpose and understanding, the pain that our customers are in, or the real life that she's leading. So like a perfect example of this would be, we had an image, I don't know when it was, but not too long ago, of two women in a bathroom. They're clearly at a party, and one of them has the hairdryer out and is blow drying a wet spot on her dress, right? Like, we've all been there. We've been at the party and our dress has got a little wet, and you run in somewhere, maybe if you're at a house with your girlfriend and you're trying to dry it, right? Or we had another image of a woman, she's clearly all dressed up, like ready to go. But weirdly enough, she has her leg up on the counter and she's shaving her leg because she had that, oh shit moment, I didn't shave my legs, right? So, and that is all representative of, like, she's leading this busy life, she's dynamic, she's, and there's a lot coming at her. And it's just trying to humanize, our muse again, and like that we get her and we understand her. Sometimes it's light, sometimes it's not. And we're trying to find that, that sort of balance. At the end of the day, we always say we want to make you laugh or gasp. That's very hard to do with every image or every piece of copy. But we don't want just an image that somebody looks at and goes, oh, that's a pretty picture. We want there to be some meaning behind it. And again, it's never going to happen 100% of the time, but we want it to be a good part of the brand visual language.
Great. And are you taking a different approach for different channels, or is it one campaign theme across all channels?
No, we definitely, I think, again, 4 years in now, create and use content differently for different channels, as we've understood sort of what our audience or our customer, we refer to audience as just anybody that's paying attention to the brand or we want to reach. And then obviously a customer is a customer. They want different things in different places. So if we tailor the content to a channel, what then we want to do is just not let it like die there. So like, as an example, influencer content for us, like in emails, is not compelling, but it's compelling, as part of what we do on social. So, but then we don't say, all right, we're going to put it on social and just let it die there. We bring it back into the e-commerce experience as a way to discover products, but we don't lead with it because we don't find it as a starting point for a conversion journey. But, for somebody that comes to the website and doesn't know the brand or doesn't want to shop by category, we surface influencer content through like a discover experience on the website. Because again, the sort of state of the customer is more, I'm going to discover what I want, as opposed to like, I'm here to fulfill an intent that's known. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think we've gotten better at understanding what content for what channel. And it's not, I think anybody, in e-commerce, consumer internet will say, like, you do have to create content for different channels and use it in different ways.
Well, and now we all have the added challenge of doing it all remotely if people weren't already fully remote. So how have you continued those conversations with your team and stayed on track with things, with everything else that's going on in the world, and adjusting your, remote work situations and still maintaining that collaborative approach to and aligned approach to what you're trying to do to reach your customers?
Yeah, so we are, all remote. There's one other person in the office here today. And, I was thinking it's sort of like that book, with the stages of the team. Like, I feel like we're going through that. Like, we were storming and norming and forming or whatever, it's been up and down. There's a couple things for us that I think have made, when we've gone through more difficult transitions being all remote, we've implemented some strategies I think that has made our work better. The first, and I always talk about this because I'm passionate about it, is I think you have to be a great writer when you're remote, because so much is like, and by the way, I think this when you're not remote, but so much is sort of lost over Zoom. And things are happening so quickly, and there's not that like touch base, there's not the informal conversations, that so much context gets lost. And so, we had, as a business, had felt very strongly about, writing narratives pre-COVID. So like, as an example, our board meetings, every other board meeting would be a narrative. The board at first was like, what the hell? Like, where's our slide deck? I was like, no, we're going to try this. And then they were like, this is amazing, because it's like a written record of like everything you think and your team. And, we can come back to it at any time. Can't hide behind, a narrative. And internally we've written narratives, but during COVID, it's become even more important. And so what we've done is we've said, all right, we're going to train everybody on how to write. And so we've actually had classes, like writing classes, because maybe not surprising, a lot of people are very uncomfortable writing down their thoughts. And it's very scary when you're sitting at a blank piece of paper and you've got to like actually succinctly and clearly communicate your thinking and the what, the why, and the how behind whatever you're trying to accomplish. So that's number one, is really doubling down on written communication, not falling back on just 1,000 Zooms every day. And then ensuring, though, that we give people the power and the tools to be good writers. The second thing is, we have 3 different stand-ups a week. Monday morning, I talk to the company. Tuesday morning, they ask questions. And then Friday, we talk about silver linings. And there are so many days when I don't want to log in. I just don't feel like it. I don't want to answer questions. I don't want to give an update. I'm human. But you got to do it. You got to show up. And, we ask everybody to be off mute, because when everybody's on mute, people hold back, they don't talk. So we've given everybody headsets. It's like, wear your headset and talk. So I think that like scheduled face-to-face is mission critical. And you just find your topics, you find your thing that is going to be important from a structure perspective. And then finally, we just do really simple Friday updates where it's 3, 2, 1, 3 things you accomplished, 2 concerns, and 3 things I accomplished, 2 things upcoming, and 1 burning concern. But it's totally fine if you don't write it, because I said, don't just share something to share. So yeah, those are our like 3 things that we do to stay in sync.
Okay. And how have all of these investments with your team really led to more effective campaigns and more conversions and driven your company forward?
Yeah, well, I think I'll start with, we raised a really big round we closed it in June of 2019, 50 million. I don't think we would have had that outcome. And the support, the partner, we set out to raise 30, we raised 50. If we hadn't had a very, very developed, strong point of view on brand, and then the ability to say, here's what we've done from a content perspective, and then overlay that with like pulses in traffic, follower growth, I'll call it, sort of inputs from a data perspective to obviously the thing that matters the most, an output around growth, or efficiency in CAC. And so, it was interesting because I think we're very data driven and we measure everything. But when we did our fundraising, it was really an opportunity to like step out of the weeds and sort of show how, the investment in storytelling and brand had driven, like I said, these input metrics to ultimately output and conversions. Is it like a 1-to-1? Is it like, oh, look, we had all these impressions from an earned media perspective because we talked about breast cancer awareness in October and our customers loved it. Here's the data. And then, in December, that drove 1,000 purchases? No. But I think when you are building a brand and you're building a company, some of the things are going to be highly measurable and investors are going to look for like, this is black and white working. And then other things are going to be a belief in what you're doing. You've got the mix right, and it's like scalable. So, you know, I think that it definitely helped us raise money. The second thing is it's much easier to hire and recruit. I always say that, you know, whatever your content strategy is, it has to be, and I'd say content is just a reflection of brand. It has to be a reflection of your culture, because, you know, how your employees show up every day is going to manifest itself in the brand and the content. And then when, you know, your customers interact with that, it's either going to reinforce or break down what you're sort of like putting out there from a marketing perspective. So brand and culture have to be aligned. And when people come to work here, they very often almost always love shoes, or their wives do. But they also believe in, like, you know, sort of the mission and the purpose. And that's what enables you to create content with no content team is because you have people that are like bought in and want to be part of being more than just like a direct response e-commerce business. So I think it's allowed us to hire great people and create a great culture. I mean, when you walk in the Tamara Mellon office, big and on the wall is our manifesto. And it's very, you know, you're either in or you're out on that. And I think that's a very important rule for culture, is it should be like cut and dry if you're part of it or you aren't. And then therefore it'll be reflected in the brand.
Excellent. Well, I would love to keep asking you my questions, but we've got quite a few questions from the attendees if you're ready for some of those.
Great.
And I know we've answered some of these, so I'm going to pull out a couple that will give you some room to mention anything else that you wanted to share. So Amy asks, you know, tell us more about what does luxury mean for the brand as people become more concerned with sustainability?
That's a great question. So luxury for the brand, first and foremost, means quality. So that is, for us, the single biggest definition of what a luxury product is. And, you know, we manufacture in the best factories in Italy. Everything's handcrafted. There's no skimping on, you know, quality for margin. The second thing for us that defines luxury is service. And so it's wrapping her up in a warm hug and taking care of her in a way that, you know, she didn't even know she needed to be taken care of, like with something like Cobbler Concierge. And then, you know, the last piece is what I've sort of gone on and on about, and that is, you know, feeling a part of a community where you have like shared values. That feels like modern luxury to us. And we think, you know, the modern female luxury consumer, that's important to her. Now, you were right. Sustainability is also important. It hasn't been an authentic place for us to start from. And hasn't been a focus for the brand and hasn't been part of our definition of luxury. However, both Tamara and myself understand the importance and are working on, you know, how to integrate, how to maintain quality while integrating a more sustainable, you know, approach. And it's for a long time been very difficult, right? Because if you go to a tannery in Italy and you look at like quality in Italy, it's often in the leather. What's amazing is that there has been such a phenomenal amount of innovation and material development, like so rapidly in the last couple of years, that we think that the tide has shifted to it being the right time to achieve the level of quality that we think we need to have in the brand with a more sustainable solution. So we're working on it. But what we're hesitant to do is suddenly say, well, we're now a sustainable brand. Because, you know, if I go back to that culture piece, then you have to, in my feeling, my belief is that you have to live that like to your core to claim it. You have to live it in everything you do and how you operate your company and how you produce your product. And we're just not there. So we'll take some steps, but we're not sort of saying, well, this is our next big plant we're gonna plant and we're gonna own this. I hope that there is true innovation there, and that there is a brand that like comes forth and like really creates a sustainable luxury brand.
So you in talking about your Italian manufacturing operations, how does that aspect of your brand and being based in LA, how do those things influence your storytelling and who you're reaching to drive sales on your site?
So one of the things that I joke about is that every time somebody joins Tamara Mellon, one of their big ideas on content is, we really need a picture, we really need a video. And I'll just use the word Giuseppe because we always say like, there's always like a Giuseppe in like the factory with like nails in his teeth and he's hammering the shoe. But that's always the first idea. Like, we gotta go to Italy, we gotta film Giuseppe in the factory making shoes. But it's both, that's a very like, and then I in a very nice way, I have to say, like, we're not going to do that because it feels very like phoned in and like not like creative and authentic to us. And so we talk about our factories, we talk about it being Italian made, but honestly, we haven't really figured out our unique way of like talking about that in a more meaningful way. But it's like on that, like, we're still in pursuit of it because I don't think we talk about it enough. And there is a disconnect between price and quality online. So people automatically assume, well, because we're half the price, we must not be as good a quality. When you look at our NPS scores, we have a massive score and our quality is like over and over again, our customers saying why she buys from us. It's almost like Culver Concierge, when she gets the shoes, she's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea they were this quality. So we still have to figure that out, but we don't want to do it in a way that's just like checking the box, because we think it's dilutive to like the good quality content we put out that's very thoughtful.
Okay. And so Birdie is asking what you think about adhering to fashion seasons and introducing products. How does that play into your storytelling and your conversion goals?
Yeah, great question. So when I talked earlier about 4 ways we're trying to disrupt luxury, like I said, bring product to market, channel, price, and brand. Bringing product to market, yeah, we launched Buy Now, Wear Now, or See Now, Wear Now, Buy Now, but basically seasonless. And we really try to reflect that in the way we market in our e-commerce goals. So as somebody that did not come from fashion, I was like, wait, what? I'm like, I don't understand this. So like right now, you guys, we're in fall, right? It hasn't gotten that hot. I mean, cold. Well, it doesn't get that cold in LA, but anyways, but right now, fall is about to go on sale. Like it's so backwards and that it makes zero sense to me. So I was like, well, this is an easy thing not to do. So yeah, we're designing much closer to the customer. So, we're bringing product to market in, anywhere from like 6 to 8 weeks. And we're designing close to the season and we're marketing in a way that is about what she's wearing right now. That's hard when you're like geographically dispersed your customer, but we don't think about seasons and we don't operate that way.
Okay. And I've got a few questions from people that are touching on what your next steps are going to be in terms of physical retail locations, whether you might get into men's footwear, favorite or next collaborations. If you could tell us what's in store for scaling for you.
Okay, so no men's. At least no men's for now. It just, again, sort of like sustainability, but that's more closer to what we would do. It's just not sort of a focus for the brand and, sort of where we feel we need to focus and win. And we want to continue to be a brand for women. Offline's very interesting and very important. We've had a lot of success with micro retail and mobile retail. So We have 2 trucks right now. So our concept for retail is that we replicate like a closet experience. So when you come into our stores, you shop, all the shoes are out. So basically we took a big step back and we said, like, what's broken with buying shoes offline? Or like, we walk into a store and you awkwardly say, like, can I try this on a 37? And then somebody goes behind the curtain, brings you out a 37, and you're like, oh, I actually need a 36 and a half. And then they come back out and you're like, okay, now I don't like this. Well, how about that style? Do you have that in a 36 and a half? And then they go get it and they come back in and you're like, actually on this, I think this open toe, I need a 37, you know, and it's just filled with friction. It's terrible. And then we saw that there's like this, you know, there's like this sort of like neuroaesthetic response that we all have when we see this like amazing, beautiful closet filled with product. And so we created dream closets. And then when you come in, every shoe is available and displayed in every size, so you can just sort of move up and down. So we've put that in a truck and we've taken it on the road, and then we've created these little micro closets offline for like physical permanent retail. So we're going to lean more into that. It's working incredibly well for it's solving again some pain points that she has around time, efficiency offline, and yet it's beautiful. And we believe that, you know, at the end of the day, she wants to touch and feel product and she wants to have an experience. So more of that. What was the other quote? It was men's
collaboration. So favorite collaborations and how you are partnering on messaging that collaboration.
So collaborations are a very, very tough, you know, I think an important and critical decision for a brand to make. And again, like everything else, we have a framework around how we decide what collaborations we're going to do, because we have a lot coming at us and we want them to be, you know, ideally like meaningful, solving some sort of pain point. And obviously, you know, what we say is elevate and relevate the brand. Yeah, we're working on some things, particularly with some other female-led brands, just like we did with Lord Jones and the first ever CBD stiletto cream that we launched last year, or with Carla Welch and Getting Out to Vote. We're always trying to think about, okay, what product doesn't exist, or, you know, who do we have aligned values with, and who might we do something interesting with? So we're working on some things. But I obviously can't talk about them in advance. But I, you know, my one sort of response is you've got to be very, very selective, yeah, with who you partner with. And for us, that's sort of the filter.
I think we have time for maybe one, maybe two more. Ashley's asking what your advice is for staying ahead of or creating or driving trends in your space.
So it's interesting because we were actually talking about this earlier, and I think what is important for a fashion brand is, you know, to pay attention to trend and be relevant, but to look for signature, you know, items or signature opportunity. And by the way, this is like incredibly hard. So if we think about some examples, right? Bottega with their weave, or Rockstud and Valentino, or Amina Muaddi and her heel, you know, signature elements, or Louboutin and the Red Soul, signature elements are really important and can drive word of mouth. So we focus a lot on trying to think about that and find something that, you know, is an unlock. We had that a bit with Frontline in the early days of the business. We launched with a PVC sandal that was very identifiably Tamara Mellon. But I think you're always looking for how to extend that. And we've done like that with Frontline and Flatline. And that's what we focus on, is like, where are there signature design elements to own? Where are there innovations in material or construction? And then how do we stay relevant on trend?
So you've emphasized authenticity in pretty much everything we've talked about, which is wonderful and so timely to what people are looking for. How are you acting on all of this? Like, what are the practical, like, things that someone can walk away with the session, like go-to resources of yours, tools, and or recommendations you have for the attendees in terms of, you know, putting things into action?
Oh gosh.
Favorite go-to stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I do read a lot, and sort of like a broad cross section. For fashion, I, read everything that Business of Fashion puts out. I think they have, a really good pulse on like the industry, and they reach and they cover topics from like business to merchandising to design. And that is probably for me, in terms of like an industry pulse, the most important. Other than that, I think it really is like an internally facing exercise that, is important to invest in. I think if you give up and you don't spend the time sort of defining your brand and your content strategy and your rails, your pillars, whatever, however you want to frame it, I think you're doing a disservice to the team. It's incredibly painful, and it's not something that's like one and done. But I think, I take cues from lots of other businesses, whether it's like Amazon writing narratives and press releases, but then you got to use those tools and you have to put them into practice. And you have to be relentless in like communicating what your decisions are about the brand. I think if you are expecting people just to see it, understand it internally and do the right thing, you're fighting an uphill battle. So, I think really the best source is like, again, what I said earlier about like writing your thoughts out, because if you write something out, you're inevitably going to find holes in your own thinking. And if you force yourself to figure out those holes, then the people around you that you're asking to follow you, they'll have a better shot of doing what you want them to do if you've sort of thought through all the moving parts.
Mm-hmm. We did have a question about your company culture, and I'm so sorry to the attendee whose name I can't find right now. But what was your team's response to the writing classes that you got for everyone, and those kinds of things that you've done to help train them and grow them?
So the way we describe the culture is where people that come to work here is you have to have a relentless will to win, coupled with togetherness, respect, and authenticity. Relentless will to win means you'll do whatever you need to do in order to compete and obviously win. And so when we discussed, writing as a core way to stay competitive, communicate, and execute, with a lot of trust built into our culture and this real feeling like we're in it together, everyone was like, great, sign me up. I mean, they were scared. Some people don't want to write, but there's a real like trust in our culture and a willingness to do whatever we need to do to win. And, they trusted that this was going to be a tool that we would use to run a better business.
Awesome. It's so valuable coming from a publication. I obviously think writing is an essential skill and tool. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of those insights and your experience. That brings us to the end of our chat. And thank you so much to our attendees for their questions. And again, Jill, for your time and everything you shared today. Thank you to Hawke Media for putting on this event. Our MC is on deck for the next session. So I hope you all enjoyed
Stephanie for being a great moderator. Woohoo! You kept us going and kept us moving. Thank you.
I enjoyed it very
Jill
much.
and Stephanie, you were both fantastic. Just absolutely phenomenal. You covered so much in your talk and you were so thorough in your questions, Stephanie, that it was even hard to fill in the gaps from the audience because you just both covered so much ground together. So thank you for that.
All right.
Thank you.
Best everybody. Bye.